Still on Kenya.
Thank you so much.
Still on Kenya, as William Ruto's action is seen as a victory that will put an end to the week-long protest movement that grew from online condemnations of tax increases into mass rallies demanding a political overhaul. The protests by Kenyans have been likened closely to that of Nigeria during the demand to end police brutality tagged EndSARS protest. Although many Nigerian government tax policies are not considered citizen-friendly by some people at the moment, coupled with high rate of inflation across the country. And so they ask the question, for how long will citizens bear the hardship? But all that is probably a question of time. Joining us now on the show to review President Ruto's decision is Ambassador Keshi, Nigeria's former diplomat and national president of the Association of Retired Career Ambassadors of Nigeria. Good morning, Ambassador Keshi, and thank you for joining us on the morning show.
Good morning, Ruben. Good morning, Rufai, and good morning, Ayo, and welcome from the Caribbean.
Thank you very much, sir.
Well, Ambassador Keshi, we've been discussing Kenya. Just to ask you, we've seen there a demonstration again of the power of the citizen action, citizen power, with President Ruto backtracking. But even in spite of that, the people are still on the streets in Kenya this morning. What lessons do you think we can draw from this Ruto wedged in between the streets and IMF?
I think there are a couple of lessons that we need to draw from what. Yes, I think there are a couple of lessons that we need to draw from what has happened in Kenya. When I listened to the president yesterday, and I guess that speaks to the question of what Rufai asked the gentleman from Kenya. It was clear, very clear, that number one, Kenya needed resources to be able to execute some of the things that the president said he wanted to do. But I think that the major problem was that the communication was very poor to start with. The people were not properly enlightened. They were not properly educated in the first place. They were not properly informed of the need for these resources. And if the president had taken time to do what he wants to do now, perhaps he would not have experienced this riot, and perhaps lives would not have been lost. But having said that, the second point again that we have to learn, not just in Kenya, but throughout the continent, is the fact that we need to convince the police and the military that they have to learn how to manage crises like this. This is not the first country where you find so many people killed because they are demonstrating in support of their right. They have the right to demonstrate, for goodness sake. It's a democracy, and people have the right to demonstrate from here till tomorrow. Look at what is happening in Israel. Consistently every day of the week, people are demonstrating against Netanyahu. Not one single person has been killed. Not one single person has been killed. But anytime there's a major demonstration like this in Africa, what happens? The police jumps in immediately, and before you know it, lives are lost. So police around the continent, and also in this country, they have to learn how to manage crises like this. And there are better ways they can handle this situation than just opening fire and killing people. And the guns they are using were purchased by the people because they are serving the people. But now that the president has said that the things he will do, my advice would be for the president to move with military precision and begin the dialogue. Dialogue should have taken place first, but it didn't take place. He has the opportunity to move very quickly. One major national broadcast will not solve the problem. He needs to reach out more to the people and try to, win them over. But I think he needs also to take more actions, maybe against the police leadership, or maybe something else he needs to do. But certainly, communication is something that leaders must learn to do. They must not treat the people anyhow. They must not just take a decision and believe that that's the end of it, take it or like it. No, the people of Kenya have shown that they cannot be treated as if they do not matter. And it's a lesson even for our country, because there are so many similar issues that are going on today in Nigeria. And I hope our leaders and members of the National Assembly are taking a cue, so that when they are approving a couple of things, they need to bear in mind. I know our leaders believe they can handle the situation in Nigeria, but look, it gets to a place and the people say, which is what they've done in Kenya, enough is enough. And someday in this country, whether the leaders divide people or not, people will get to that stage if we do not manage our own crisis very well too.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Ambassador Keshi. And I'm glad that you talked about the lessons that we can learn. But one of the things you said about the police, the military in some instances, is that they can be high-handed, but they don't act on their own authority, on their own will. And that's why we call in Nigeria, the big question was who gave the order? So when we talk about the police or the military being held accountable, should we also look at the leadership, because they might have been invited by the executive to come to manage, the situation in Kenya? So should we just leave it to the police, the military? Should those giving them the order not also be questioned or advised as to how to better handle situations like this? And then on the flip side, in fairness, what the security agencies in Kenya might say is that, well, the people became a bit violent. They then went to the assembly and they burnt a part of it, and they had to escape. The members had to go to the basement and escape through there. So they had to then take on more, employ the use of force. Would that be any justification? Because sometimes that is the reason given that, criminal elements hijacked the protest. Is that enough reason to then use armed force?
Ayo, it's not enough reason. Look, it's not enough reason to justify what has happened. I remember when we were in the university and we were demonstrating, the police have always used that crazy excuse that criminal elements, would take over the situation. No, it has always been a classical argument of the police, particularly in this part of the world. As a matter of fact, if the leadership of the police wants to help the president and the country, the police chief in Kenya should honorably resign because of the loss of life. It goes back to what I said earlier on. Police in this part of the world, they have not learned and they have no clear idea on how to manage demonstrations. Their first reaction is to match force with force. That is it. No matter what happened, yesterday, they will repeat the same thing a couple of weeks from now. So it's a question of the fact that they have never cared. Look, we have to understand one thing about the police in this part of the world, the Nigerian police, the Kenyan police. They were set up by the colonial administration to protect the colonial office at that time. And that has been the mentality of the police. For the police today, whether in Nigeria or Kenya, their first obligation is not to protect the people, because as of today, they are not protecting the people. Their first obligation is to protect the government, to protect the people in power. And you see it everywhere you go around in this country. How many, in Nigeria, for example, what's the total number of police personnel? Well over half of that are guiding the big guys in town. So it's a question of the fact that the police in this part of the world are not trained to manage crises of this nature. That is the honest truth. And that's why lives are lost. Their first reaction is to use violence. And so the police chief will be helping the situation in Kenya if he honorably decides to call it quits and put in his resignation letter.
Okay, so two things. Number one will be the role of the lawmakers that signed such a bill. And they talk about a rubber stamp assembly. Because a lot of people from his political party followed him and they hurriedly passed that bill. They couldn't speak as one voice. It pretty much reminds you of the Nigerian National Assembly. Let's talk about that. Professor George Ayite calls them the retinue of retainers. Those that are with you as a leader because they want you to stay on in power because of their own interests. Let's talk about them. Secondly, let's also talk about our conundrum with IMF. Wale Julius Nyerere called it famously the International Ministry of Finance that teleguides everybody. After colonialism, another shackle has become the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the World Bank, the Bretton Woods, the IMF. And we have seen what they have done across the African continent. Their appeals are not always good. The West never thinks of giving us a Marshall Plan, like the Marshall Plan that was given to Britain after the Second World War. It's tools to keep us enshackled. When are we going to be free?
Well, Rufai, like most people, I'm not a strong fan of the IMF, but I always tell people, the IMF is like a doctor. If you are sick, you go to the doctor. And in our own case, if you are sick, for countries, you go to the IMF. Now, the IMF gives you prescribes medications for you, just like the doctor prescribes medications for you. If you decide you do not want to take all the medications you've been given, and things don't work out well, that is your problem. But the truth of the matter is that very often it is the people, it is the governments that go to the IMF like we go to the doctor. But on a more serious note, here's the deal. If you listen to the gentleman from Kenya, he is saying they need to know where all the money they have borrowed in the past, what has it been spent for? And I think that is the question. The money that countries borrow, particularly in this part of the world, in Africa, in Nigeria, and elsewhere, citizens are now demanding, we need to know exactly what you have done with the resources. We can actually as well say, the money that is being passed, the budget that is being passed annually by the Nigerian government, by the Kenyan government and the others, huge sums of money. Citizens need to begin to question, where have they gone to? What have they been spent on? And I think it's the fact that people are not really seeing these things. It is not changing their lives. It is not affecting them as it should be. That is why you have these upheavals. But the most important thing now is that the National Assembly, the Nigerian National Assembly, because you made reference to it, they should take a cue from what has happened and do not ignore what's going on in Nigeria. People are screaming, they are hungry, a big power, and then you are passing, without even discussion, you are passing a couple of bills for more expenditure that are not even necessary at this point in time, that you can afford to do without. You can even today set a supplementary budget for more purchase, expenditure. What we should be doing is look critically at the budget to see whether there are places we can begin to cut the budget very seriously and be more prudent in the management of state resources. That is the only way.
Well, Ambassador, just one question,
Sorry.
briefly. Yes, just one question, briefly. What do you think this would, how do you think this protest will impact on Ruto's political future and, his administration generally? Because now the protest today is no longer about tax again. The slogan has changed to Ruto must go. What impact do you think it will have on his immediate future?
Well, look, I think it depends on how he handles this. And the truth of the matter is that this is not only about Ruto. This is also about the police, the leadership of the police. So it depends on how the president is able to manage this. It depends on how quickly he moves to engage the public. It depends on how quickly he reaches out. That's what I said at the beginning. One very good presidential address will not solve this problem. he needs to reach out. He needs to talk to the people. He needs to even begin to hold town hall meetings if the crowd will allow him to go out of the palace. But the truth of the matter is that he needs to act with military precision and find how to douse the fire. If not, eventually he may just sacrifice himself, and resign. But the bottom line is that he now has to show his political ingenuity. Because look, he's been on the political scene for a long time. So he should be able to think very quickly, on his feet and decide, this is how I'm going to deal with this situation. And he might be able to get a reprisal. One thing I thought he missed in the speech yesterday was the fact that he did not make enough comment. I mean, he did not say exactly what he would do for the souls that were lost. I think he should have dwelt more on that also. Maybe that would have helped aside the feelings of the people and the families of those who lost their loved ones.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Keshi.